was.
George's life was now all about boxing and building up a career to give him a shot at the heavyweight title. It meant a tough training program, early to bed and early to rise, no drinking, smoking, or carousing, and above all, no female distractions. The strict discipline paid off for George. He won fight after fight, staring down his opponents before knocking them out. He was obedient to his trainer's rules until he met Adrian Calhoun on a blind date in August of 1970.
I got kind of afraid of him when I first saw him. I saw that nose, and I thought his nose has been broken, I think, and he looks like he's pretty rough. So, but he wasn't. He was just a fighter. All he thought about was boxing and wanting to be heavyweight champion. He was very kind and very shy, and that's what really did attract me.
They started to date in secret.
He was every bit a gentleman. He'd hide things in my little gifts in my purse. Or, you know, I remember we went to the movie and we saw the love story. And George cried like a baby in the movie.
It was a difficult courtship. Adrian, who lived and worked in Minneapolis, tried to join George wherever he was training, but had to hide from the coaches. She began to feel like a groupie and persuaded George to get married.
Then we got all the way down to the courthouse to get our license, and he did not want to take the blood test because he's afraid of needles. And I thought, oh my goodness, we're not going to be able to get married.
George was late for his own wedding, but they did manage to become husband and wife in December 1971. The honeymoon was very brief. George returned to the ring where he fought with ferocious determination, destroying his opponents. By the time he got a shot at the heavyweight title, he had won all of his 37 professional fights, 34 of them by knockouts.
He was able to put his punches together. Like, for example, any of his fights, when he scored those big knockouts, he would really brutalize the guy before he got him out of there.
In December 1972, George said goodbye to Adrian, who was very pregnant by now, and flew to Kingston, Jamaica. This was his chance at the heavyweight title. His opponent was the current champion, Joe Frazier. George was not expected to survive Frazier's left hook. In spite of his record, he was almost considered a joke by sports writers.
Because Joe Frazier had beaten Muhammad Ali and was undefeated, they didn't see how this young kid, who really just threw punches this way, not snapping them, could win.
I was still afraid of Joe Frazier. He was smoking Joe Frazier. That means when the bell rang, he said, I come out smoking. And I had seen evidence that nothing could stop him. You hit him, he liked it.
The opening bell rang on January 22nd, 1973, and George faced the greatest challenge of his 3-year professional career.
I remember that the left hook of Joe Frazier sounded like a bullet.
So this was some tiger of a champion.
Foreman was anything but intimidated.
It's target practice for George Foreman.
George was powerful. There's no doubt about that. I mean, he was out there to get me. He was dropping death charges on me, man. I couldn't survive him.
And almost with his first punch, he had a man on the floor 7 times. It was like a ball bouncing up and down.
It is over! It is
Before the end of the second round, the fight was stopped.
The hardest guy I faced, and I didn't believe it. I didn't believe it.
It was absolutely devastating. No one could believe it. And from that point on, George was regarded as invincible.
It was the fight that changed George Foreman's life and career. George was 24 years old and the new heavyweight champion of the world. He was also a father. Adrian had given birth to a girl, Michi, who instantly became a mini celebrity.
I remember seeing my child for the first time in Kingston, Jamaica, by way of a newspaper clipping. And I remember looking at that face as though I had known her all my life.
George was every bit the proud father when he came back to Minneapolis to spend some time with his new daughter.
He just held her and just stared at her, and he was in love with her. And it looked like this giant with this little small baby. But he wasn't going to get up with her at night because he thought he heard something go crunch when he picked her up. He thought he broke her arm.
Family reunion was not as peaceful as Adrian had hoped. George was now a celebrity, and the couple was besieged by reporters. In just over 5 years, George Foreman had punched his way from gutter to glory. He was on top of his game, and failure seemed to be the farthest thing from his mind.
You are watching George Foreman, part of Knockout Week on Biography.